Which brings us on to our last presentation, Richard Tang from Zen, who is always a very welcome presenter at our meetings. So I'm pleased to say he's come back again today to do another lively presentation, I'm sure. So thanks very much, Richard.
Thank you very much. And yeah, great to be back at LINX to talk about the full fibre wacky races. But before we just dive into that, I just want to make everyone aware that we've got 3/16s available for sale. So if you want some IP addresses, come and have a chat with us, ipv4@zen.co.uk. Now, back to the full fibre wacky races. Let's start off with a brief history of the evolution of the internet, starting with the 1990s, the decade of dial-up. This is when Zen launched, and I enjoyed connecting to the internet with my 28.8 kilobit per second US robotics courier modem, and this is actually my modem here. Wind forward to the 2000s, this is the decade of ADSL, asymmetric digital subscriber line, and this is when the internet went from being pretty niche to being used by the majority of people in the UK. 2010s was the decade of FTTC, fibre to the cabinet, became the dominant broadband technology in the UK. FTTC was BT's silver bullet against the LLU operators, and it worked really well for them as well. And the 2020s, this decade, is the decade of full fibre. The decade of full fibre, unlike the previous 3 decades, is different because it's the last big infrastructure build in our lifetimes. The 2030s and the 2040s will also be the decades of full fibre. And a lot of the players in the industry realised that if they wanted to be an infrastructure player, this was their chance and their last chance to get on the boat. Otherwise, they're going to miss the boat. And a lot of players did get on that boat, about 100 of them in the UK, to build full fibre networks and take their chances with the great alt-net gamble. Why do I say it's a gamble? Because it's a commercial punt where the outcome is uncertain. And there were 3 potential outcomes that might have been on those players' minds. Let's get big. Let's get bought, maybe. The ideal is do both. Get big and then get bought for much more than your investors put in the first place. Have a big fat party and drink champagne. But maybe an outcome was get stranded. What do I mean by get stranded? I mean build a network, get overbuilt by your competitors, and then you can never find enough customers to fill up your network to make a profit. Never mind pay back the investment made by your investors. And then you end up having put a load of money into a network that then is worth not very much at all. There is a 4th potential outcome here that I've added to this. Number 4, be a niche rural player forever. And we'll come on to that a bit later in the audience participation section. With all these 100 altnets going back 3 or 4 years, it really felt like a gold rush to me, with lots of players building network as quick as they can with the hope of a big reward at the end of it. And back then, the business models seemed pretty straightforward, linear, in terms of raise a load of money, build a load of network, get some paying customers, either through your vertically integrated ISP or through wholesale partners, race as fast as you can to the finish line. If you look back over the last couple of years, then, well, it's felt not so straightforward at all. Lots of complexities, and you can really sense the pressure within these network builders now. And if you work for an altnet, I'm sure you'll be experiencing this. Now, I wouldn't call it a gold rush. It feels to me more like the wacky races, hence the title of my presentation. And let's spend a bit of time looking at some of these complexities that have arisen over the last couple of years. I'm going to start off with the dilemma between building and filling up your network with paying customers. So going back 3-4 years, the focus was on build, almost build and they shall come. Let's build as quick as we can. The customers will come later. Look, this is the once in a lifetime opportunity. But in the last couple of years, there's been a big shift from, I'd say the majority of the altnets to filling up the network with paying customers. A lot of the network builders have drastically slowed down their build rate. Some have stopped building altogether because they want to demonstrate that their business model can turn a profit. The next dilemma is the dilemma between build and acquire in terms of a strategy to grow the business. The biggest players that have still got huge ambition, they're doing a combination of both. But I sense that there's definitely been a shift in the last couple of years from build to actually let's slow down our build and let's look at acquiring businesses. There's also the question of being acquired or merging. So for a lot of the altnets, probably again the majority, this is the end goal. Let's be acquired and hopefully let's make a return on our investment. But I think there's a lot of nervous investors out there at the moment. The altnets and the investors are thinking, where will we fit into the big consolidation and when? The investors are thinking, will we actually make any return on this investment? Will we break even? Or is this about cutting our losses? Next dilemma is the retail ISP dilemma. So a lot of altnets are focused on building network. That's their core business. That's what they're good at. Their core business is not running a retail ISP. And I've run a retail ISP for nearly 30 years now. And it takes a lot of work to do it well. It's not just providing the broadband, but for example, you've got additional services like digital voice that you need to have a solution for. And then you've got regulatory constraints like one-touch switching. One-touch switching, I mean, we were ready in March with our one-touch switching development, but it had taken the majority of our pretty sizable software development team many months to get to that point. And that's a distraction that a business whose core business is building network really doesn't want. And just on one-touch switching, I mean, with all these altnets, I shudder to think how a lot of them will be able to deploy the level of resource that we've deployed to get that over the line. Many altnets, of course, they're forced to have a retail ISP because unless you have an anchor sponsor like Freedom Fibre with TalkTalk or like nexfibre with VMO2, then you've got to sell to end users until you get to a scale where you can then take that to market and say, you know, look, we've got a wholesale offering with a meaningful base of premises passed for you to go at. And then with the big consolidation happening now, there's the challenge of the consolidators buying up smaller altnets that have these retail ISPs bolted on and what to do with them. So recent example, CityFibre acquired LitFibre. LitFibre has a retail ISP, and in the press release, CityFibre said, as a wholesale-only operator, CityFibre will explore options for the retail ISP following the integration of the network. So making it really clear that running a retail ISP is not what they want to do. Of course, CityFibre, very acquisitive, are quite likely to end up with a bunch of these retail ISPs, what they're going to do with them. So that is a challenge. Overbuild, the challenge of overbuild. And this is one of the big worries for the network builders. Now, between different network builders, there's pretty much an unwritten understanding that we will not overbuild each other because we're just diluting value. And in fact, Jeremy from Netomnia said, overbuild is a cardinal sin. And other CEOs of other altnets have expressed a very similar sentiment. But then Clive comes along and says, well, Openreach is going to build everywhere. And when I talked to Clive on the subject of overbuild, he said, because of our strategy, we're not taking much, if any, notice about who's there already. We're just building and building. Now, overbuild is such a big deal because you need a certain level of market penetration to get the business model to work. Typically, you need at least 30% market penetration to get the business model to work. And this was, I go back to the original business model of GigaClear back, many, many years ago, when Matthew Howe was heading up GigaClear. They built into rural communities. They were only game in town. ADSL was dog slow. It cost them about £1,000 to get to each premise in a village, and they'd get a market penetration about 1 in 3. So it cost them about £3,000 up front to connect to a single customer, and that business model worked over a 15 to 20 year payback period. The lowest break-even figure I've heard is again from Jeremy at Netomnia, more of him later, at 13%. And if you look at take-up currently across the alt-net world, it varies between about 5 and 30%, average at 16%. Openreach, on the other hand, are doing really well. They're up at 34%, so just over a third. And here's a graph showing some of the players in the market and their current take-up on their network. I think the overall takeaway from this graph is that there's not very many of them yet that are viable, profitable businesses. There's a bit of you need to take this a bit in context, because those players that are building quickly will have a lower percentage because they're building quickly. So a bit of a health warning over these figures. Openreach have stated in their recent release that they expect by the end of the decade they will have 40 to 55% of their network connected to customers. Okay, bold ambition, but they certainly have got a good starting point for it. And of course, the last big hurdle, the investors that put their money in 3-4 years ago did it in the days of very low interest rates. They didn't anticipate the huge increase that we've seen in interest rates. And again, you can sort of feel the increase in pressure within the altnets servicing these big piles of debt and paying levels of interest that they didn't anticipate in their original business models. So those are some of the things that in the last 2 years have really made the altnet world a lot more complicated. Let's look at the players themselves now, starting off with the player that is far and away in the lead, Openreach. If you take their last announced figure and then add some, their build rate, they're at today around about 14.5 million premises passed. In the last quarter, they built just over 1 million premises. And they're going to continue doing that for the next 2.5 to 3 years until they get to 25 million by the end of December 2026. And if you just think about that number, that 1 million premises in 3 months, 333,000 a month, so more than 10,000 premises every single calendar day. So anyone that's involved in the Openreach build, hats off to you. It's pretty amazing. So Openreach absolutely going like a train. Let's have a look at VMO2, Virgin Media O2, and nexfibre. Interesting combination. The first question I want to ask is, are these two organisations effectively two parts of the same entity? And to answer that question, first of all, let's have a look at the investors. Virgin Media O2 is owned by Telefonica and Liberty Global. Telefonica and Liberty Global also are the owners of nexfibre, with nexfibre, InfraVia also have invested and own a stake. So same but different. Let's look at the build strategy. So Virgin Media O2, 16.2 million premises. build mainly in urban areas, nexfibre's build strategy is to build 5 to 7 million premises in semi-urban to semi-rural premises, complementing the VMO2 build. And both organisations have talked about a combined footprint of up to 23 million premises. So you can see from that that the builds are completely coordinated between the two. So the way I would describe them is they're legally separate entities, they've got common parentage, but the partnership between the two organisations is fundamental to the creation of nexfibre as an entity. So to sum that up, siblings is the best way to look at them. Let's talk about the build. VMO2 first. So VMO2's network is mostly the cable network. It's DOCSIS 3.1. They have a project called Project Mustang, which aims to upgrade all of those to XGS-PON by 2028. A bit difficult to get an accurate number of how many they've done so far. So my best digging around in estimating, I think about 3.2 million. Nexfibre have been much clearer about what they've built. They've just built, actually last month, they've just exceeded 1 million premises passed. Their goal is to build to 5 million by the end of 2026, with an option for 2 million more. Rajiv Datta, who I interviewed on my YouTube channel 3 months ago, said nexfibre will build full fibre to more homes in 2024 than any other altnet. A bold claim, but 3 months on, he's absolutely smashing it and definitely living up to that claim. Let's look at wholesale, VMO2 and nexfibre, because again, an interesting story. 3 months ago, VMO2 announced that they were going to create a netco. That netco would be a wholly owned subsidiary that would complete the fibre upgrade of the cable network. It would do wholesale. Now, VMO2 have been talking about wholesale in their network for quite a few years. They're finally going to do it and compete with Openreach. Potential alt-net consolidation was in the announcement, so you can expect that they might acquire some of the altnets. And they made it clear that the nexfibre joint venture remains separate. Nexfibre, on the other hand, the CEO of VMO2, Lutz Schüler, said it reinforces our position as the leading challenger to Openreach. And certainly if they can deliver that on that plan, they will absolutely be the leading challenger to Openreach in terms of full fibre infrastructure. Deliver it and deliver it well, of course, which is no easy feat. Nexfibre, well, wholesale was always part of Nexfibre's strategy, not just to be a bolt-on to VMO2. Acquisition, absolutely part of their strategy. In September last year, they gobbled up. And I think there's a strong possibility that the wholesale offering will be joined up between nexfibre and VMO2. And from a customer's point of view, so if Zen was to enter into a partnership with VMO2, nexfibre, or a combination of both, it makes most sense for us to have one API, ideally one wholesale agreement, one set of service relationships, one commercial set of relationships to access that footprint of up to 23 million. So we'll wait and see what happens with both of those. So interesting. Let's look at because this is full Fibre Wacky Races, let's look at a race results table as of today, 28th of May, in terms of premises passed. And like a big caveat here, some of these are estimates, not all the numbers are ready for service. And also big thanks to Mark Jackson at ISP Review for providing some of this information. Number one, out in the lead by miles, Openreach, 14.5 million. Zen partners with Openreach. Number two, VMO2 and nexfibre, as I said on the previous slide, 1 million nexfibre, just over. VMO2, I think about 3.2 million. CityFibre next, 3.6 million. Zen also partners with CityFibre. Number four, Hyperoptic, 1.4 million. Community Fibre, 1.3 million. Netomnia, 900,000. BRSK, 520,000. GigaClear, just over 500,000. Those are the top 8. There was something in the press a couple of months ago that BRSK and Netomnia might get together, which would propel them to 4th place. I've just had a chat in this room with Steve Glendinning of BRSK, who said, don't believe what you read in the press. And in any case, we know that all of these guys have been talking to all of the other guys and a lot of other guys for a long time, so anything can happen. And some things will happen for sure. And that brings me on to the big consolidation, which has started, but has got most of its way to run. Let's...
Slide. I don't know if it's mine. Can you go back to the previous?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So on that slide, we've almost built enough for the whole of the UK if you stopped right now. Yet people are still building. And what does that mean for our industry over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of our cost base and our ability to compete with other locations in the world? Just ponder that for a moment.
Yes, I think the FT did a tot-up 2 or 3 years ago, and the total aspiration for build ended up of something like 75 or 80 million homes. Well, I mean, there's about 30 million in the UK, including businesses. Yeah. So absolutely good point. And depending on how you look at it, glass half empty is that's a lot of waste. Glass half full is free market competition. So, we'll wait and see. I think with build slowing, we won't get anywhere near those numbers. But yeah, thanks for the question. The big consolidation, as I say, it's happening now. Let's look forward. Like, consolidating businesses is a really difficult and complex business, so it's not going to happen overnight. So we need to look forward quite a few years, 5.5 years to 2030. And what will the industry look like in 2030? I had a look at the altnets today. There are about 25 scale players, full fibre players in the UK. And look, I chose 100,000 as a pretty arbitrary number. To say anything above that, I'm going to call a scale player. But look, there's no science behind that. Everyone thinks there'll be less than 25 scale players, but how many will there be? And at this point, I'm going to use the collective expertise of this LINX meeting. The internet supremos of the UK, you guys, you're going to come up with the answer. Will it be A, 2 or 3 scale players? Will it be B, 4 to 6 scale players? C, 7 to 10? Or D, more than 10? So everyone in the room who thinks the answer will be A, 2 or 3 players, this is in 2030, raise your hand. Okay, so I think there's like five. Okay, what about 4 to 6? Yeah, that's probably about half the room, I'd say, maybe just under. 7 to 10? That's probably about 6, 7, 8 people. 9 at the back. More than 10. Anyone thinks there'd be more than 10 scale players? 1. Fantastic. The underdog, I love it. So my view is 4 to 6. Openreach for definite. VMO2 plus nexfibre plus some acquisitions, absolutely definitely. And I think there'll be 2 or 3 scale players apart from that, which would make the total 4 or 5. Beyond 2030, I think there'll be pressure to consolidate further so that the answer ends up being 2 or 3 if the Competition and Markets Authority let that happen. Let's move on to the next audience participation question. Now, I've got you warmed up. Rural broadband. And this question, will niche rural players survive? So will there be niche rural players beyond 2030. So let's say between 2030 and 2035, will it be like the local grocer where the supermarkets just put them out of business? Or will they find a magic formula to keep those businesses going? Yes or no? So everyone who thinks that niche rural broadband players have a long-term future, raise your hands.
When you say long term. CapEx cycle of 10 years. So will these guys last 10 years? 100%, all of them. Every single one of them. Beyond 10 years, they're going to go recycle all the CapEx, change out all the optics, blah, blah, blah. Don't know.
Okay, so the question is, what am I talking about long term? And I'm not talking about will they be here in 2030, because I think a bunch of them will. What I'm saying is, will they find business models that will be able to sustain to say 2035, and in 2035, you know, they've still got that niche, they've still got that loyal customer base. So they've got a long-term sustainable business model beyond 2030.
It's economics.
Okay, maybe I've been not totally precise, but yeah, but the sentiment is into the 2030s. On the one hand, you've got a set of businesses that are just being trodden on by the big guys. That's no. On the other hand, you've got a bunch that find a formula that will persist. And it feels like, you know what, we could do this for another 5-10 years. We're doing a good job. That's yes. Yeah. Yes. Right, all the yeses. Right, yeah, that's a good half of the room. Good half of the room. What about no? Oh, that's not very many, actually. Yeah. So yes wins by about threefold. I would say the yeses are about 2/3 of the room, 60%. The no's are about 10%, and 30% are on the fence. Didn't decide to put their hands up. But my answer to this is no. I think they're going to really struggle. And I think it's pretty binary. I think as long as they're not overbuilt, they can persist indefinitely and continue to do the brilliant job that they've been doing. And as I said when I presented this at Connected North, it's quite emotive for me, this, because I want them, they're doing a great job, they've done a great job, I want them to persist forever. But so far, Openreach has been true to what they've committed to. And when they say we are going to build everywhere, I'm taking that pretty literally, that by 2030 they will have built pretty much everywhere. And some of these rural footprints might be 80% overbuilt. And then they're competing with Sky, TalkTalk, Vodafone, Zen, bunch of other ISPs.
Starlink doesn't have the capacity, basically. But so the point.
Actually, I'm going to mention Starlink a bit later.
So the point is I actually think they'll last longer if they can manage capex, because what is the biggest barrier for altnets right now? Conversion. Actually, actually, when we moved from ADSL to NGA, took forever to convert people until they needed it, right? So I think if the rural guys were to get 40-50% take up, which they will, because Openreach aren't going to be there for a long time, they're good to go. Just manage the capex, put some money in the bank, so that when all the optics start to fail, etc., they can swap it out. They'll be fine, because that movement of customers from one provider to another, everybody in the industry has underestimated that, and that is what the rural guys have got going for them.
Look, there's a huge amount of inertia, absolutely a huge amount of inertia. If the answer is no, plus side is a benefit for consumers. There's a lot more choice. So you could look at it like this. Actually, I just want the rural guys. If there's any rural guys in the room, I really want you to prove me wrong, because actually I want you to continue forever. Anyway, interesting about rural. Let's talk about Jeremy Shallow from Netomnia, who I interviewed last year on my YouTube channel. He's quite an outspoken guy, anyone who's met him. One of the things he said, somewhat controversially, is BDUK is a waste of taxpayers' money. Let's just have a look at BDUK. Building Digital UK, or Project Gigabit. The B and D in BDUK, I'm sure they've changed a couple of times, but anyway, it's Building Digital UK now. 1.4 billion of 5 billion invested to date of government money. And the government has a few things to say. Gigabit broadband coverage in the UK has increased to 81%. Not all of that's full fibre. They're quite pleased about that, but they also acknowledge that most of it is commercially driven rather than government driven. However, they do take credit. Over 1 million homes, businesses and public buildings are now able to tap into gigabit capable networks because of UK government investment. Most of these properties are in hard to reach rural locations where residents and businesses previously would have struggled to perform even the most basic online tasks. And the government have let 32 contracts so far. This is a who has won those 32 contracts. So City Fibre right out in front with 9 contracts, Wessex with 4, Wildernet with 3, and GigaClear with 3. Connect Fibre, Go Fibre, Quickline, Full Fibre and Freedom Fibre each have 2. Very well done to Freedom Fibre. Last week won their second contract with Cheshire. So they went from 1 to 2. Connexin, another B Corp, hooray! Come on, hooray for B Corps, Fibrous and Vonius with 1. So that's how they're distributed. If you have a look at how the money's being distributed, wow, well that paints a very interesting picture, because City Fibre have got over half of the 1.4 billion, and the others, Fibrous, Quickline, will both with over 100 million, and then it goes down to Vonius with 12 million. The amount paid per property passed varies quite a lot, actually. It's pretty interesting. So the lowest is £900 a property. That's for Wessex Internet to build to 7,000 premises in North Dorset. And the biggest is £3,800 per property, and that was for GigaClear to build 4,400 premises in East Gloucestershire. Now, one organisation that's absent from this chart is Openreach. And of course, in the super fast FTTC days, Openreach did really well. They won most of the government BDUK money. But they've chosen not to bid for these Type A and Type B contracts, which are the local and regional contracts. But, again, in their very recent release, they said they are the preferred bidder for Project Gigabit Type C cross-regional contracts. So you can expect to see Openreach gobbling some of that remaining 3.6 billion in the very near future. So there's a bit of stats, but let's get back to the question, is BDUK a waste of taxpayers' money, or is it a good use of taxpayers' money? I'll ask the audience and see what you all think. So everyone who thinks BDUK is a good use of taxpayers' money, raise your hands. I'll half then. 3, well, that's about 5. The current BDUK, yeah. Yeah, it's about 5 people, something like that. About 5. Okay, maybe 5.5. And everyone who thinks BDUK is a waste of taxpayers' money, raise your hands. Well, I mean, waste definitely wins, so there's a heart, yeah, that's probably... It's a good idea, but done badly. Okay, let's have that, number 3. Good idea, but done badly. Nice, well, I'll have to put that on my slide next time. Okay. Well, actually, I've just voted for the third one. I was going to say it was a good use of taxpayers' money. Look, I think Jeremy's got a very good point. A lot of the government-funded build would have been done anyway with commercial build. So I think he's spot on there. However, everything taken on balance, it has prompted the build of full fibre broadband and other broadband technologies into areas that wouldn't otherwise had it. So I'll give the government a bit of credit, a bit of the benefit of the doubt, caveat on this number 3 option. They could have done it a lot better. And however, I'm not going to let the government off the hook, because where did they waste taxpayers' money, our money? Wind back to 2020, they bailed out bankrupt satellite company OneWeb with $500 million, about £400 million of our tax money. And look, I'm not criticising OneWeb, now OneWeb, Eutelsat, after it merged with the French company last year. My point is that OneWeb, Eutelsat, investing in a low Earth orbit satellite constellation is a risky commercial venture, and it's not the government's position to be using our tax money to punt on risky commercial ventures. So that's my point with this. Let's move on to something that has nothing to do with the full fibre wacky races, but everything to do with everything. So I was here 5 years ago, almost to the day, to talk about when AI becomes super intelligent. And in that presentation, I predicted that AI would become truly intelligent, and that intelligence would overtake the intelligence of humans. I'm back now 5 years later, and something pretty significant has happened in the AI world: large language models. And if you go to the Zen website, you can now have a chat with Zenny, AI chatbot, which is based on GPT-4, and please feel free to try and break it. I shouldn't have said that. Not to this audience, anyway. But the question is, large language models, hugely capable. They can do some really impressive things. AI, again, including generating some of the images that I've used in this presentation. Are they showing early signs of true intelligence? Or are they just dumb algorithms that happen to be particularly good at predicting the next word? So, have a think about that. Everyone who thinks that large language models are the early glimmers of true intelligence in a machine, raise your hand. Ooh, 2. I think that's 2. Everyone who thinks that LLMs are dumb algorithms that just happen to be really, really good at predicting the next word. Yeah, that's like 2/3 of the room. So overwhelming dumb algorithms. What's my answer? Well, I make the 2/3 because I think that it is the early signs of true intelligence. And look, the algorithms themselves absolutely are designed to select the next word that has the greatest probability of being the next word in a given sentence. So that's what they're designed to do. But when I look at measures of intelligence and what they can actually do, that's glimmers to me of true intelligence. Anyway, that's a whole different presentation. Let's get back to the full fibre wacky races. With all this change in the market, with change comes opportunity. Zen's the oldest ISP in the UK that still exists now in its original form. What are the opportunities for Zen from all this full fibre activity? Well, we've currently got 2 infrastructure partners. We've got Openreach, we've got CityFibre, and at the moment we're actively exploring the possibility of partnering with others. In fact, we've got several discussions underway. So if you are an altnet listening to this or watching this, and you like the idea of selling your network through the Zen brand, then come and have a chat with us. And more specifically, come and have a chat with Dave Barber, who is our strategy director, and that's his email address. So that is everything from me. Hope you found that interesting and entertaining. I certainly did. Thanks for your questions, and thank you very much for listening. And I think we've got about just over 10 minutes left if anyone has any more questions. I knew it. You had to have a question. Come on, bring it on.
I just wondered, in your analysis, what did you count for on MDUs?
Yeah, so MDUs, premises passed means flat in an MDU. So obviously hyperoptic.
So you've included MDUs in the hyperoptic number?
Yeah, hyperoptic, that's 1.4 million flats, effectively.
Okay. And also have you done any analysis on who's kind of worst overbuilt? I.e., you know, who's rolling around the table as green zero, and who's perhaps, you know, all red or all black?
I've not done any quantitative analysis. What I do know is that speaking to the altnets, the number that they give for the amount that Openreach has overbuilt.
I'm not actually, take Openreach out. Would you like some numbers? Anyone?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Here we go. So, and this is data from roughly, I want to say, about 4 or 5 months ago. So, of the build that altnets had was roughly about 6.1 million. Does that ring a bell? Maybe that long
I think
ago?
it's more than that now.
But no, about 6 months ago, though, roughly. That'd be about right?
I think it'd still be more.
Okay.
I think the total altnet,
when I did this, altnets were at 6.1 million.
Right.
Of that build, only 1.6 million wasn't overbuilt. So
by another altnet.
By another altnet.
Are you including VMO2?
I'm including Virgin Media as an altnet, but they are only 3 million. So almost a third of those guys who aren't saying they're overbuilding each other might be, basically. And this is from street map data, or what is it called? The Streetworks, sorry. It's kind of scary when you look at it, because what's driving people isn't this notion of, we're connecting the world, it's how do I make some money? And where they're building is where there's demand, or there's perhaps the most money. So where I live, we have 2 altnets and Openreach. The town just up the road has got a 3rd altnet and Virgin. And it's kind of scary. And the point we need to work out is, and I think I mentioned this last LINX meeting, in France, I don't know if there's any French members here, it'd be good to get a sense of it, but their traffic growth has slowed to 10% this year. 10%. And then you're building all this fibre, and France is what, 96% fibre? Something like that. It's in that ballpark. They've done a pretty decent job, even though they're French. Just kidding. So that's a standard British joke. When you look at that, you kind of start to think, what does that mean for us as an industry? And this is my point about the investment. So we've done all this hard work to give everybody faster speeds just at the point of time where we might not need it. And I don't know about anyone else, but it scares the bejesus out of me. And I'm glad I'm not that far away from retirement.
A really interesting anecdote from Jeremy at Netomnia was he said that where Virgin are, they see a lot of success in VMO2 areas because their customers that have already made the switch from BT to a faster provider, so they're much more willing to switch again versus people that have been with BT for say 20 years and they're just too scared of switching whatever. So yeah, so and anyway, if you are thinking of switching, switch to Zen. Obviously. Any other questions? Oh, great. Thank you very much.